The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched as far as the eye could see. John Carter sat in his chair and looked around at the strange beings that filled the massive room. Some had 4 arms, others had skin that looked like crystal, and a few floated in the air without touching the ground. All of them were angry, and all of them were staring at him. Amy Ross sat next to John, her hands folded on the table in front of her. She was young for a lieutenant, only 28, but she had been working with John for 3 years. She knew when he was worried, even though his face never showed it. Today, she could see the small lines around his eyes that meant trouble was coming. The room fell quiet when a tall, thin creature with blue skin stood up. His name was Vexton, and he spoke for the Zalari people. John had met him many times before, but today Vexton looked at him like he was an enemy. "We are here today because of the humans," Vexton said. His voice came through a small device that changed his clicking sounds into words everyone could understand. "They have broken our most important laws. They have built weapons that can destroy whole star systems." John felt Amy shift in her chair beside him. He put his hand on her arm to keep her still. They had talked about this before coming to the meeting. The council was wrong, but getting angry would not help. Another creature stood up. This one looked like she was made of living glass with light dancing inside her body. Her name was Shard of Light, and she spoke for the Hervani people. John remembered helping the Hervani when their son started to die. Human scientists had worked for 2 years to save their worlds. "We have seen the tests," Shard of Light said. Her voice sounded like music, but her words were hard. "The humans have created bombs that can make space itself tear apart. This cannot be allowed?" John wanted to stand up and tell them the truth. The machines they were calling bombs were not weapons at all. They were power plants. Human engineers had found a way to make tiny stars that could give clean energy to whole planets. It was the greatest discovery in human history, and they had planned to share it with everyone, but the council was afraid. They looked at humans and saw how fast they learned new things. They saw how quickly humans spread to new worlds. They saw human hospitals saving lives and human schools teaching children, but all they could think about was danger. A floating creature that looked like a jellyfish made of silver spoke next. "The humans grow too fast," it said in a voice like wind chimes. 50 years ago, they had 1 world. Now they have hundreds. They learn too quickly. They change too much. More voices joined in. The Corvani delegate, a bear-like creature with red fur, talked about stopping humans before they became too strong. The Theshan representative, who looked like a giant insect, spoke about cutting off trade with human worlds. John listened to each speaker. He wrote down their names and what they said. Amy did the same. They had learned long ago that keeping good records was important in their job. Hours passed. The creatures in the hall took turns speaking against humanity. They told stories that were not true. They talked about human aggression that had never happened. They spoke of secret weapons that did not exist. Through it all, John and Amy sat quietly. Some of the other delegates looked at them with curiosity. Why were the humans not defending themselves? Why were they not shouting back? John had learned something important during his 15 years as an ambassador. Sometimes people made up their minds before they heard the facts. When that happened, talking more just made things worse. Better to listen and understand what was really happening. The truth was becoming clear. The council was not angry about weapons. They were angry about fear. They were afraid that humans were becoming too powerful. They were afraid that humans might not need the council anymore. They were afraid that other species might start to follow human examples instead of council rules. As the sun set outside the great windows of the hall, an ancient being rose from a throne at the center of the room. Pranzalandra was older than most civilizations. Her people had started the Galactic Council 3,000 years ago. Her skin was pale green and her eyes were completely black. When she spoke, everyone listened. "The charges have been made," she said, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Humanity stands accused of creating forbidden weapons. They are accused of breaking the sacred technology accords. They are accused of threatening the peace of the galaxy. John stood up slowly. The hall became completely quiet. Even the air seemed to stop moving. How does humanity answer these charges? Prime Zelandra asked. John looked around the room one more time. He saw hundreds of faces staring at him. Some looked angry, some looked afraid. A few looked sorry, as if they knew this was wrong but were too scared to speak up. Honored Prime, John said. His voice was calm and clear. We request time to consider our response. 48 standard hours should be enough. Whispers filled the hall. Many of the delegates seemed angry that John was not answering right away. They wanted him to beg or argue or make excuses. They did not understand that John was buying time for something much more important. The request is granted, Prime Zelandra sighed. This session will resume in 48 hours. The accused will give their answer then. The hall began to empty. Delegates gathered in small groups, talking in low voices. Some pointed at John and Amy as they walked past. John heard the word arrogant in several languages. Amy packed their papers into a case while John made one last note. As they walked toward the exit, she leaned close to him. Sir, should we tell them what the compression technology really does? She whispered. John shook his head slightly. They do not want to hear the truth, Amy. They want us to be the enemy. It makes things simpler for them. They walked through the long corridors of the council building. Their footsteps echoed off the walls. Other delegates moved past them without speaking. Some looked at them with hate. Others just looked away. As they reached their ship, Amy asked the question that was really bothering her. What are we going to do, sir? John was quiet for a long moment. He looked up at the stars through the transparent roof of the docking bay. Somewhere out there were the human worlds. Hundreds of planets where people were building new lives, making new discoveries, and helping their neighbors. Those people deserved better than this. We are going to call home, John said finally. And then we are going to make a choice that will change everything. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. She had been working with John long enough to know that tone of voice. He was not talking about defending humanity in the council. He was talking about something much bigger. As their ship lifted off from the council world, John began composing a message to Earth. It would be the most important communication of his career. What he wrote in the next few hours would determine not just humanity's future, but the future of the entire galaxy, the council thought. They were dealing with just another species that would beg for mercy or fight back in anger. They had no idea that humans had a third option. They had no idea that the quiet dignity they mistook for weakness was actually humanity's greatest strength. In 48 hours, John would return to the council hall. But he would not be returning as a supplicant or a warrior. He would be returning as the representative of a species that had just made the most important decision in galactic history. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the war room on Earth, but this was not about war. The walls around her showed pictures of stars and planets, trade routes, and ship movements. Everything looked normal, but Lisa knew that was about to change forever. She had watched the recording from the council meeting 3 times already. Each time it made her more angry. John Carter had tried to explain the truth about their new energy technology, but no one would listen. The council had already decided that humans were dangerous. General Ryan Murphy walked into the room carrying a thick folder. He was a big man with gray hair and hands that had built more things than they had destroyed. Behind him came Patricia Wells, who managed all the human colonies outside of Earth. Her face looked tired, like she had not slept in days. The numbers are worse than we thought, Patricia said. She put her computer tablet on the table and pushed a button. Pictures appeared on the wall showing dozens of star systems. Our people are already feeling the effects. Trade ships from other species are canceling their routes. Scientific partnerships are being ended. Some colonies are being asked to leave space stations they helped build. Ryan opened his folder and spread papers across the table. Look at this, he said, pointing to charts and graphs. In the last 50 years, we have given more help to other species than anyone else. We built the jump gates that let ships travel fast between stars. We created medicines that cured diseases that had killed billions. We shared our farming techniques so hungry worlds could grow food. Lisa picked up one of the papers. It showed how many times human rescue ships had saved people from disasters. The number was huge. She looked at another paper that listed all the schools humans had built on other worlds. There were thousands of them. The Hervani should remember what we did for them, Patricia said. Her voice was full of hurt. Their son was dying, and they had maybe 10 years before all their worlds became too cold to live on. Our scientists worked day and night for 2 years to build machines that could keep their planets warm. We saved their entire species. General Murphy pulled up more information on the wall display. The Altarians were being attacked by space pirates. We sent our ships to help them for free. We lost good people in those battles. The Krvani had a plague that was killing their children. Our doctors found a cure and gave it to them without asking for anything in return. Lisa felt her anger growing, but she kept her voice calm. And now they think we are the threat. The room became quiet for a moment. Then Patricia spoke again. It is not just about being ungrateful. They are really scared of us. They see how fast we learn new things. They see how quickly we build new colonies. They see our young people growing up on 100 different worlds, and it frightens them. Ryan nodded. They have been the same for thousands of years. Their technology barely changes. Their societies stay the same. Then humans show up, and in 50 years we go from one world to hundreds. We solve problems they could not solve in centuries. We adapt to any environment. To them, we look like we might take over everything. Lisa understood the problem now. The Council was not angry about weapons. They were angry about change. Humans changed things wherever they went. They made life better, but they also made it different. For species that had been the same for thousands of years, different felt dangerous. A communication signal came in. From the outer colonies. Lisa pressed a button, and 3 faces appeared on the screen. Governor Ben Clark from New Montana looked serious. Director Kate Phillips from the Kepler Research Station looked worried. Administrator Joe Martinez from the Farming Worlds looked angry. We got your message about the council meeting, Ben said. Our people are asking questions. They want to know if we are going to have to give up our research and let council inspectors watch everything we do. Kate leaned forward on her screen. The restrictions they want are crazy. They want to control every new invention we make. They want to approve every new colony before we can build it. They want us to limit how fast our population can grow. Joe shook his head. After everything we have done for them. My worlds feed half the galaxy. We grow food for species that never learned how to farm properly. We give it away for almost nothing, and this is how they thank us. Lisa looked at the reports coming in from across human space. The same story was everywhere. Other species were already starting to stay away from human colonies. They were afraid that being friends with humans would make the council angry at them too. There is something else, Patricia said quietly. Our intelligence sources say some council members are talking about military action. They want to force us to accept their restrictions. Some of them think they should attack our research stations before we can develop any more new technology. The room became very quiet. Lisa felt something cold in her stomach. She had been a military officer for 30 years. She knew what it meant when people started talking about preemptive strikes. Ryan spread out more papers. If they want a fight, they will get one. But it will not be the fight they expect. We have advantages they do not understand. Our ships are faster, our weapons are better. Our people are more creative in battle. But more than that, we have friends they do not know about. He was right. Many species had private agreements with humanity that had nothing to do with the Council. The Altarians would fight beside humans because of the help they had received. Several smaller species depended on human protection. Even some council members had secret deals with human companies, but Lisa did not want a war. Wars destroyed things, and humans were builders, not destroyers. There had to be another way. What if we just left? she said suddenly. Everyone looked. At her, Patricia raised her eyebrows. Left? What if we pulled out of the council completely? Took our people, our ships, our technology, and just left them alone? Ryan thought about this for a moment. They would collapse within a year. Maybe? Less. Too much of their infrastructure depends on our maintenance and support. Kate spoke from the screen. The Jumpgate network would fail in 6 months without our technicians. The medical systems we installed on dozens of worlds would break down. The disaster warning network that protects the whole galaxy runs on our deep space monitoring stations. Lisa walked to the big window that looked out over Earth. She could see ships coming and going from the orbital stations. Many of them carried supplies and people to help other worlds. All of that could stop. They want us to be the enemy, she said. They need us to be the threat so they can feel important by controlling us. What if we just refuse to play that game? Patricia understood first. If we withdraw completely, we are not the enemy anymore. We are just gone. They cannot fight us or control us because we are not there. Ben's voice came from the communication screen. My people would support that. We are tired of being treated like criminals for helping others, Joe nodded. The farming worlds, too. We can sell our food elsewhere. There are plenty of independent species who would be happy to trade with us. Kate looked thoughtful. The research stations could redirect their work. Instead of sharing everything with the Council, we could focus on projects that help humanity and our real friends. Lisa turned back to the others. It would have to be unanimous. Every human world, every colony, every station. We all go or none of us go. Ryan was already thinking about the logistics. It would take months to pull everyone out safely. We would need to coordinate with the species that want to keep working with us. Some of our people might want to stay and work independently. That would be their choice, Lisa said. But humanity as a whole would no longer be part of the Council. System. Patricia pulled up population numbers. We have about 2 billion humans living on Council worlds or working in Council facilities. Moving them all would be the largest migration in history. Lisa looked around the room. She could see that everyone was starting to believe this could work. It was not a war. It was not surrender. It was something the Council would never expect. They think we need them, she said. They think we will beg for forgiveness and accept their restrictions. They have no idea that we can just walk away. The discussion continued for hours. They talked about which colonies could become independent. They planned how to maintain relationships with friendly species. They figured out how to shut down human operations on Council worlds without causing disasters. As the meeting ended, Lisa made the decision that would change galactic history. Send a message to John Carter. Tell him we support whatever choice he makes. If he thinks it is time for humanity to find its own path, we will follow. The message was sent through the fastest communication channels humanity had. It would reach John in 6 hours. Lisa knew that when he read it, he would understand that Earth supported the most dramatic decision in human history. Humanity was about to walk away from the galaxy they had helped build. The Council thought they were calling humanity's bluff. They had no idea that humans did not bluff. When humans made a decision, they followed through completely. In a few hours, John Carter would return to the Council chambers. He would not be returning to argue or beg. He would be returning to announce that humanity was leaving. After that, the galaxy would never be the same. John Carter walked into the Great Hall of the Galactic Council exactly 48 hours after he had left. He carried only a small device in his hand. Amy Ross walked beside him, her back straight and her face calm. They moved through the crowds of delegates like they were walking to a normal meeting, but everything had changed. The message from Earth had arrived 6 hours ago. Admiral Hayes had been clear. Humanity supported whatever decision John thought was best. The colonies were ready. The military was ready. 2 billion humans were ready to leave everything behind if necessary. John took his seat at the human delegation table. The hall was more crowded than before. Word had spread that something important was going to happen. Representatives from species that rarely attended council meetings had come to watch. Everyone wanted to see how humanity would respond to the charges. Amy sat down next to John and opened her notebook. She had written down the names of every species that had spoken against humanity 2 days ago. She had also written down the names of the few who had remained silent. Those were the ones who might still be friends after today. Prime Zelandra rose from her throne. The ancient being looked even older than before, as if the stress of the situation was weighing on her. Her black eyes swept across the hall before settling on John. "The 48 hours have passed," she announced. "The human delegation will now answer the charges brought against them." John stood up slowly. The hall became completely quiet. Even the translator devices stopped humming. Every eye in the room was focused on him. He walked to the center of the hall where a speaking platform waited. His footsteps echoed off the walls. When he reached the platform, he turned to face the assembled delegates. He could see hundreds of faces staring at him. Some looked angry. Some looked curious. A few looked worried, as if they sensed that something unexpected was about to happen. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," John began. His voice was clear and strong. "Humanity has carefully considered the charges brought against us. We have reviewed every accusation made in this chamber 2 days ago." He paused and looked around the room. In the front row, Vexton leaned forward in his seat. The Zilari representative expected John to apologize and accept the council's demands. Behind him, Shard of Light waited to hear humanity beg for forgiveness. "We have also reviewed our relationship with this council," John continued. "For 50 years, humanity has been part of this organization. We have contributed to its goals and supported its missions. We have shared our knowledge freely and offered our help to any who asked." Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had expected anger or defiance, not this calm recounting of facts. "In those 50 years, human engineers built the jump gate network that connects this galaxy. Human doctors developed cures for diseases that had plagued other species for centuries. Human rescue ships responded to disasters across hundreds of worlds. Human teachers educated children of dozens of species. Human farmers shared techniques that ended hunger on worlds that had struggled for generations." John's voice remained steady, but Amy could hear the pain underneath. She knew how much it hurt him to see their work dismissed as dangerous. "We helped build space stations, designed atmospheric processors, created communication networks, and provided disaster relief whenever it was needed. We asked for nothing in return except friendship and cooperation." The hall was still completely quiet. Some delegates looked down at their hands. Others stared at the walls. A few met John's eyes, and in them he could see shame. 2 days ago, this council accused humanity of creating weapons of mass destruction. This accusation was made without investigation, without evidence, and without giving us a chance to explain. "The technology you fear is not a weapon. It is a power source that can provide clean energy for entire civilizations." John held up the small device in his hand. "This contains complete specifications for stellar compression technology, safety, protocols, implementation guides, and maintenance instructions. Everything you need to build power plants that will never run out of fuel and never create pollution." He set the device on the platform. Several delegates leaned forward to look at it. "This was going to be our gift to the galaxy. We planned to share this technology freely with all council members. We wanted to help solve the energy problems that have limited so many civilizations." Murmurs began to spread through the hall. Some delegates were realizing what they had almost lost. Others were beginning to understand how badly they had misjudged humanity's intentions. But this council chose fear over friendship. You looked at humanity's rapid advancement and saw a threat instead of an opportunity. You demanded restrictions on our research and permanent monitoring of our development. You asked us to limit our growth and submit to controls that apply to no other species. John's voice grew stronger. You have made it clear that you do not trust us. You have shown that our contributions are not valued. You have demonstrated that our friendship is not wanted. Prime Zalendra started to speak, but John held up his hand. Therefore, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The words hit the hall like a physical blow. Delegates jumped to their feet. Voices rose in dozens of languages. The translator devices struggled to keep up with the chaos. "We renounce all treaties signed under Council authority," John continued, his voice cutting through the noise. "We withdraw from all Council committees and organizations. All human personnel will be recalled from Council facilities within 30 standard days." Vexlan was shouting something about humanity's obligations. The Krovani delegate was demanding that humans be forced to honor their commitments, but John was not finished. "To those species who have worked with humanity as true partners, our withdrawal from the Council does not affect our relationship with you. Individual treaties and agreements between our peoples remain in effect if you choose to maintain them." He gestured toward the device on the platform. "The stellar compression technology is our final gift to this galaxy. Use it wisely. Learn from it. Build a better future with it. We offer it freely despite the treatment we have received here." The chaos in the hall grew louder. Some delegates were demanding that humanity be forced to stay. Others were shouting that humans were abandoning their responsibilities. A few were trying to ask questions about their individual relationships with human colonies. John turned away from the platform and walked back toward Amy. She stood up and gathered their few papers. They had planned this moment carefully. Everything important had already been moved off Council worlds. Every human citizen had been given the choice to leave or stay as an independent resident. As they walked toward the exit, John heard Prime Zalundra calling for order. Her ancient voice boomed across the hall, but the delegates were too shocked to listen. The impossible had happened. Humanity was leaving near the door. John passed a small group of delegates who had remained silent during the accusations 2 days earlier. The Altarian representative stepped forward. "Ambassador Carter," she said quietly, "does this affect our trade agreements?" John stopped and looked at her. The Altarians had been good friends to humanity. "Our bilateral agreements are not affected. Humanity values its friendship with Altaria." Relief showed on her face. Behind her, representatives from 3 other species waited for similar reassurance. John nodded to each of them. "Individual friendships will continue. Only our membership in the Council is ending." As John and Amy walked through the great doors of the hall for the last time, the sound of arguing voices followed them. They walked down the long corridors without speaking. Other beings they passed stared at them with shock and confusion. At the docking bay, their ship was ready. The crew had been preparing for departure since receiving the message from Earth. As they boarded, John looked back at the Council building one final time. "Do you think they understand what just happened?" Amy asked. John shook his head. "Not yet. They think this is a negotiating tactic. They believe we will come back and ask to rejoin when we realize how much we need them." Their ship lifted off from the Council world as the sun was setting. Through the windows, they could see other ships in the docking bays. Many belonged to species that were probably reconsidering their own relationship with the Council. "They have no idea," John said quietly, "that we do not need them at all. They think they were doing us a favor by letting us be members. They do not understand that we were doing them a favor by staying." As their ship jumped to hyperspace, heading for human territory, John began composing his final report to Earth. The withdrawal was complete. Humanity had walked away from the Galactic Council with dignity intact behind them. The Council was beginning to realize the true scope of what they had lost, but that realization would come too late. The decision was made, and there would be no going back. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to exist without humanity's helping hand. 3 months after humanity left the Council, the first real crisis hit the galaxy. Captain Nancy Thompson was eating breakfast on her independent ship when the emergency signal came through. The Kairos system was in trouble. A massive solar flare had hit their worlds, and radiation was killing millions of people. Nancy had been a human military officer for 15 years before becoming an independent contractor. Her ship, the Wanderer, was one of 300 human vessels that now worked for individual species instead of the Council. She knew what the emergency signal meant, and she knew why her communication device stayed silent for 50 years. When disasters struck anywhere in the galaxy, human rescue ships would respond within hours. The emergency network that connected all the worlds depended on human deep space monitoring stations. Human medical ships carried supplies that could save entire populations. Human engineers could fix anything that broke, but the humans were gone now. The monitoring stations had been shut down. The rescue ships had been recalled to human space. The emergency network that had protected the galaxy for 5 decades had vanished overnight. Nancy looked at the signal from Kairos and felt sick. She could save some of the people there, but her one ship could not help 12 million beings who were dying from radiation poisoning. In the old days, 100 human ships would already be on their way. She sent a message to the Galactic Council Emergency Center, even though she knew what the answer would be. This is Captain Thompson of the independent vessel Wanderer. I can provide limited assistance to Kairos, but this disaster requires a full council response. The reply came back within an hour. Captain Thompson, the council appreciates your offer, but we do not have the resources to mount a rescue operation of this scale. Please provide what assistance you can. Nancy stared at the message. The council did not have the resources because the resources had been human. The rescue ships were human. The medical supplies were human. The expertise was human. Without humanity, the council could not respond to major disasters. On the council world, Prime Zelendra sat in an emergency session with the remaining delegates. The hall was much emptier than it had been 3 months ago. Several species had left the council after humanity's withdrawal, choosing to make their own deals with independent powers. Vexton stood at the speaker's platform, but he looked very different than he had during the accusations against humanity. His confident arrogance was gone, replaced by barely controlled panic. The situation in Kairos is worse than we thought, he reported. Without human disaster relief, we have lost 12 million beings to radiation poisoning. The death count is rising every hour. The Hervani delegate Shard of Light spoke next. Her crystalline body flickered with nervous energy. Our own worlds are facing a crisis. The atmospheric processors that keep our colonies habitable are breaking down. The human technicians who maintain them left with the withdrawal. Our engineers do not understand how to fix them. Similar reports came from across the galaxy. The jump gate network was failing. Without human maintenance, the gates were shutting down one by one. Trade routes that had connected worlds for decades were becoming impossible to use. The Theshan representative, who looked like a giant insect, clicked his mandibles nervously. Our commercial networks are collapsing. The human colonies were our largest customers. Without them, unemployment on our worlds has reached 30%. Prime Zelendra listened to each report with growing horror. When humans were part of the council, problems got solved quickly. Human engineers could fix anything. Human doctors could cure any disease. Human rescue ships could reach any disaster zone within hours, but the council had never realized how much they depended on human expertise. They had thought humans needed the council for legitimacy and protection. They had never understood that the council needed humans to function. Alan Davis had been a commander in the Human Colonial Defense Force before the withdrawal. Now he worked as an independent contractor, helping non-council species maintain their technology. His reports painted a clear picture of what was happening across the galaxy. The younger species are suffering the most, he told his clients during a video conference. They relied on human mentorship to develop their technology. Without that guidance, they are struggling to maintain even basic systems. The economic effects were even worse than the technical problems. Human colonies had been the galaxy's biggest buyers of raw materials and manufactured goods. When humanity withdrew from galactic markets, the economic shock hit everyone. Entire industries that had supplied human worlds were shutting down. Mining operations that had sold minerals to human construction projects were closing. Factories that had made consumer goods for human families were laying off workers. The ripple effects reached every corner of what had been council space. Species that had never directly interacted with humans were feeling the economic collapse. Trade networks that had operated for centuries were falling apart. Captain Betty Ross commanded an independent human medical ship called the Healer. Before the withdrawal, she had worked with the Council's health organization, providing emergency medical care across the galaxy. Now she worked only for species that had maintained friendly relationships with humanity. "The medical situation is becoming desperate," she reported to her government contacts. "The automated medical systems on dozens of worlds are failing without human maintenance. The pharmaceutical supply chains that depended on human research and manufacturing have collapsed." The Council had established a special committee to deal with the crisis, but they had no solutions. Everything they tried to do revealed another area where they had depended on human expertise. They tried to restart the disaster response network, but they did not understand how the monitoring stations worked. They tried to fix the jump gates, but human engineering was too advanced for other species to repair. They tried to re-establish trade routes, but the complex logistics systems had been managed by human companies. 6 months after the withdrawal, the crisis was getting worse instead of better. The Altarian Republic, which had maintained its friendship with humanity, was thriving. They had signed new agreements with human colonies and gained access to the stellar compression technology. Their standard of living was higher than ever. Meanwhile, the Council worlds were struggling. Power shortages were common because they had never learned to maintain the fusion reactors that humans had built for them. Communication networks were failing because the relay stations needed repairs that only human technicians knew how to perform. The Corveni delegate, who had been one of the loudest voices demanding restrictions on humanity, now spoke very differently. "We must find a way to restore our relationship with the humans," he said during a council session. "Our civilization is failing without their support." But it was too late for simple solutions. Humanity had moved on. They were building new colonies in unexplored regions of space. They were developing technologies that made the stellar compression discovery look simple. They were creating a civilization that did not need the Council at all. Ellen Foster had been appointed as humanity's first independent diplomatic coordinator. Her job was to help coordinate cooperation between species without the bureaucratic overhead of galactic government. She worked from a comfortable office on the human world of New Geneva. "The requests for help are increasing every day," she told visitors. "But we are selective about who we assist. We help our friends in honor our agreements, but we will not return to being the galaxy's unpaid caretakers." The species that had maintained good relationships with humanity were doing well. The Altarians had become a regional power. The Centauri colonies were expanding rapidly. Several smaller species that had been ignored by the Council were now prospering under human protection, but the Council worlds were discovering what the galaxy looked like without humanity's helping hand. Systems were failing faster than they could be repaired. Problems that had been solved for decades were becoming impossible challenges again. The truth that the Council had refused to see was finally becoming clear. Humanity had never needed the Council for survival or success. The Council had needed humanity to remain relevant and effective. The galaxy's greatest civilization was crumbling, and there was no way to undo the damage. The humans had walked away, quietly, leaving the Council to face the consequences of their fear and ingratitude. The reckoning had begun, and it would only get worse. 1 year after humanity left the Galactic Council, the galaxy looked completely different. Dr. Ellen Foster sat in her office on New Geneva, looking out at a busy spaceport where ships from dozens of species came and went every day. These were not Council ships. They were independent traders, diplomats, and settlers who had chosen to work with humanity instead of the failing galactic government. Ellen's job as independent diplomatic coordinator was unlike anything that had existed before. She helped coordinate voluntary cooperation between species without the bureaucratic overhead that had made the Council so slow and ineffective. The results were better than anyone had expected. The Altarian Republic had become one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Their friendship with humanity had given them access to stellar compression technology, and they had used it wisely. Their worlds now ran on clean, unlimited energy. Their standard of living had increased dramatically, and they had become a regional power that other species looked up to. Ambassador Sarah Kim from Altaria was visiting Ellen's office today. She brought news that made Ellen smile. 12 more species have asked to join our technology sharing agreement, Sarah reported. They see what we have accomplished with human partnership, and they want the same opportunities. This was happening across the galaxy. Species that had maintained friendship with humanity were thriving. The Centauri Agricultural Collective was feeding half the independent worlds. The Vegan Mining Consortium was supplying raw materials for rapid expansion. The Kepler Research Alliance was making scientific discoveries that amazed even human scientists. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was falling apart. Only 37 species remained as members, down from the 89 that had belonged before humanity's withdrawal. Every month, more species chose independence over membership in an organization that could no longer solve their problems. General Carl Stone had retired from active military service, but he still received reports from across human space. He lived on a ranch on New Montana, where he often hosted visitors who wanted to understand what had happened to the galaxy. People ask me if we planned this, he told a group of young diplomats who were studying the withdrawal. They think we somehow knew that leaving the council would cause their civilization to collapse, but we did not plan it. We just stopped doing the work that kept them running. The truth was that humanity had been so integrated into galactic civilization that removing them had caused everything to break down. But humans had not realized this either. They had simply been trying to help, sharing their knowledge and solving problems wherever they found them. For 50 years we were the galaxy's maintenance crew, Carl explained. We fixed everything that broke, solved every crisis, and prevented every disaster. When we left, they discovered they had forgotten how to take care of themselves. The stellar compression technology that had started the whole crisis had become the foundation of a new galactic order. The species that had access to it were building civilizations that made the old council worlds look primitive. Unlimited clean energy meant unlimited possibilities. Human colonies were expanding faster than ever before. Free from council regulations that had limited their growth, humans were settling in star systems that had never been explored. Their new worlds were marvels of engineering and environmental harmony. Captain James Wright commanded the exploration vessel, New Horizons. His job was to find suitable worlds for human settlement in the regions beyond old council space. What he found amazed him. There are entire sections of the galaxy that the council never bothered to explore, he reported to colonial headquarters. Rich worlds, beautiful systems, resources that could support billions of people. They were so busy controlling what they already had that they never looked for new opportunities. This was the difference between human thinking and council thinking. The council had wanted to control and restrict. Humans wanted to explore and build. When humans were free to follow their nature, they accomplished incredible things. The council worlds were learning this lesson the hard way. In their capital city, Prime Xylandra held emergency meetings with the few remaining member species. The once proud chambers were half empty, and the discussions were desperate. We must find a way to bring humanity back, Vexton said for the 100th time. The Zelari representative had lost much of his pride over the past year. His own worlds were struggling with power shortages and system failures that his people could not fix. They will not return to the old arrangement, replied the Hervani delegate. Shard of Light's crystalline body flickered weakly. The atmospheric processors on Hervani worlds were failing, and her people had perhaps 6 months before their colonies became uninhabitable. Prime Xylandra knew the truth that none of them wanted to admit. Humanity would not return because humanity did not need them. The council had thought they were granting humans a privilege by allowing them membership. They had never understood that humans were granting the council a privilege by staying. The economic numbers told the story clearly. The independent worlds that worked with humanity had economic growth rates of 15 to 20% per year. The remaining council worlds had negative growth rates. Their economies were shrinking as their infrastructure failed and their populations lost hope. John Carter, The former ambassador who had announced humanity's withdrawal now served as Earth's representative to independent worlds. He still received messages from Council species begging for humanity to reconsider, but his response was always the same. Humanity holds no grudges, he would tell them. We wish you well and hope you find solutions to your problems. But we will not return to a relationship built on suspicion and restrictions. The galaxy made its choice, and we have made ours. The quiet revolution was complete, but it had not happened the way anyone expected. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through military force or economic domination. They had simply withdrawn their gifts and let others discover what they had lost. The Council's greatest fear had been that humanity would become too powerful and dominate other species. Instead, humanity had shown that their greatest power was not in forcing others to obey, but in choosing who deserved their help. Species that had treated humanity with respect and friendship were now more prosperous than they had ever been. Species that had chosen fear and suspicion were struggling to survive. The lesson was clear, but it had come too late for the Council to learn from it. Dr. Ellen Foster received a final message from the Council that year. It was from Prime Zelendra herself, asking for a meeting to discuss the possibility of renewed cooperation. Ellen read the message carefully, then composed her reply. The Independent Diplomatic Coordination Office appreciates the Council's interest in renewed cooperation. However, humanity has moved beyond the need for galactic government oversight. Individual species are welcome to establish bilateral relationships with human colonies if they demonstrate genuine friendship and mutual respect. It was a polite way of saying that the Council era was over. Humanity would work with individual species as equals, but they would never again submit to the authority of a body that had treated them as a threat for trying to help. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the difference between power and influence. The Council had thought power came from the ability to make rules and control others. Humanity had shown that real influence came from the ability to solve problems and improve lives. Years later, historians would mark humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council as the beginning of a new age. It was the end of centralized galactic government and the beginning of voluntary cooperation between free species. It was the end of the Council's thousand-year dominance, and the beginning of humanity's golden age. The humans had walked away quietly, leaving the Council to face the consequences of their choice. In trying to control humanity's power, the Council had lost something far more valuable than authority. They had lost the willing partnership of the most generous species the galaxy had ever known. The revolution was complete, and there would be no going back. Humanity had chosen its own path, and the galaxy would never be the same.